So as I was telling Josh, Josh knows me. I'm his brother-in-law, but my name is Justin Xavier Moore. I'm actually married to Josh's sister. Originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Right now, I live in Lexington, Kentucky, uh,
Okay.
where I do research at the University of Kentucky here. And most of my research focuses on this twofold. So one area looks at what we call the interaction between place and race and how this
Hmm.
affects cancer health inequities. And then, I'm sorry, there's a lot of. Let me
Yeah,
turn
yeah.
this.
If you try to turn your volume down, possibly.
I need to turn down my volume.
Yeah,
There's an echo.
All right.
I think that's
Let
better
me, let,
now.
me, let me see if I can. Let me help. Let me put on these headphones. I think that might be better.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yeah.
So one theme of my research really explores the intersection between what we place and race. And when I say race, oftentimes it's the effects of racism on racial and ethnic minorities. Um, and then again, how that in turn affects cancer health inequities. And then within that theme of research, I look at or explore the effects of systemic discrimination, how this influences a term called allostatic load or chronic physiologic stress, which we see to be associated with cancer as well. Right. So again, I'm an epidemiologist. I'm a researcher. I use medical data to look at what we call associations between social drivers of health, with hopes of being able to really mitigate these disparities once we again find the evidence, but then also coming up with interventions. Working with community partners, I do what we call a lot of community outreach and engagement and CBPR type of research, which is community-based participatory research. Um, so this is partnering with local churches, barbershops, and other community organizations to meet people from our community where they are, to again just get more accurate information about cancer screening, prevention, and even for some of my studies to even recruit for some of my research studies. So that's me from a research perspective. But outside of that, I'm a father, a coach sometimes for my kids. I'm a bit avid. I don't know how y'all feel about this, but I'm a huge Braves, Hawks, and Falcons fan.
Okay.
So, so you, I'm doing good now because the Falcons won the last time we played.
True.
So we'll
True.
see in a week now how I'm feeling.
All right. That's beautiful, my brother. Well, I'm very impressed with all your accolades. Josh sent it to me. How do you like to be addressed? Should I call you professor or doctor? Like, what's your preference?
Just Justin is fine. I was telling
Okay.
Josh that as well. I'm just Justin. Dealing with like just with our communities and stuff like that. I'm not a medical doctor. I do medical research and
I understand.
and things of that nature. But I don't treat or give any prescriptions. So I don't want to be, even though Dr. King was called Dr. King, just call me Justin. It makes me more comfortable.
All right. I have a brother. Give thanks. Give thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very impressed with your accolades, and I know that
Thank
you're
you.
very knowledgeable in everything you're speaking about. You
Thank you,
know.
sir. How
Yes,
would
I
you want
give
me to
thanks.
address you? I'm sorry.
Well, my name is Yasu Tafari, and I'm just I'm just a self learner. I'm interested person, and I like to talk to people who know more than myself.
Yes,
So
sir.
that's yeah. So that's
I'm the same way.
yes, sir. So that's who I am at this
So,
particular
so do
point.
you want me to call you Ayasu or
I Yasu is fine, my brother.
Ayasu? Okay,
Yes,
nice.
sir.
I love that name. Really,
Give
really
thanks. Give
beautiful name.
thanks. Give thanks. Give thanks.
Yes.
So I don't see Dr. Black in the chat. He hasn't arrived as yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Dr. Black hasn't arrived. He's also be one of our honored hosts. Dr. Black has I think I give you a small rundown in the text message. He's played with Pele.
Yeah, you did.
He's a psychologist, and 12-year radio host for a radio station in Jamaica. So yeah, me and Justin was talking about the difference between the food swamps and the food deserts.
Okay, give thanks. Because that's it. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the food. So the difference between a food swamp and a food desert is a food swamp is where they have like a mile away. They at least have like a KFC, a Church's, a Taco Bell, McDonald's, they have all these things that's kind of non-nutritional, but
Mm-hmm.
food is there, and even like a convenience store. But in the food desert now, you might not have none of that. You might just have one corner store, with like, so that's the kind of difference, a small difference between the food desert and the food swamp. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So right
so
away, a question comes to my mind. Which one do you find more detrimental to the community, the swamps or the desert?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And me and Josh was just talking about that. So in a few of the studies that we've done as an epidemiologist, we were able to take data, national data that we have among all U.S. People. So we got this mortality data from the CDC, right, which is based on death certificates, so it's pretty accurate. And we wanted to see whether living in a food desert, living in a food swamp, whether this was more associated, right? So living in those communities, whether it was highly associated or correlated with dying from any obesity related cancer. And as I was telling Josh, it's about 13 different cancers, but most of them are gastrointestinal cancers, right? So we're talking about your colorectal cancers, your pancreas, things that are in your midsection. Um, right? So we wanted to see, right, whether living in these food deserts, and again, those are places where there's a lack of grocery stores, and a food swamp is a lack of grocery stores, but then you have a high density of pro-inflammatory food options, right? So a lot of fast food places, liquor stores, right? But you don't really have a ton of farmers markets. You don't have a ton of fresh food and produce and things of that nature. Um, so as Josh almost guessed, right on the point, right? Living in the food desert was associated with about a 50% increase odds of dying from any obesity-related cancer. So if I live in a food desert versus a person who lives in a place that has a whole bunch of grocery stores, right? So you have Publixes, you have places where you can go with this fresh produce and you can buy your food, right? Just by living in the food desert alone, I increase my risk of dying from any obesity-related cancer by 50%. Again, this is just associations. It's not causal. We're just saying that you're more likely, right, to die from an obesity related cancer. Now, when we looked at the term of food swamp, which is again a little bit different than a food desert because you have these fast food chains that are there, right? That was associated with the 77% increased odds of dying from any obesity related cancer,
The
right?
swamps are more dangerous than the deserts.
So I leave it up for the data. It's a little bit. I said it's very verbose and long winded, but just a little bit higher risk if you live in a food swamp.
Right.
And
Yeah,
why?
that
And
that
my question to you all is why do you think that it's a higher risk
so,
in these food swamps?
I mean, that's a very good question, but I think it's because lack of food, as opposed to um, an overwhelming amount of
non-nutritional food.
ultra processed foods
Mhm.
would lead to malnutrition and health quicker because human beings are evolved not to eat not consistent, but constantly. So
Constantly consumption. Mm-hmm.
lack of food is not going to diminish you as fast as a constant barrage of nutritionally void foods that don't have any type of quality to nourish your body. So
Mm-hmm.
and the foods that don't have any nutritional quality to it, people tend to overload on it because it doesn't have a satiation point. It seems to be like this type of food is so chemicalized that the
Mm-hmm.
more that they consume it, is the more they seem to just want more. And that's just from like observation. You know what I'm saying?
No, I mean,
Like,
I would actually say that your observation is right on point. So I've been doing this research thing. I may be young, but I've been doing it for a while. And as a cancer researcher, these are the things that interest me a lot. And I'm trying to make sure I get the numbers right here.
mhm.
But in the study that I did, let's say about 10 years, 8 years ago at this point, we wanted to look at, again, more so like diets, right? So how certain diets associated with dying from any type of cancer. Um, so we actually did this in a what we call a cohort study of about 30,000 people. This cohort study I mean, I'll be superfluous. It's called the regards cohort, the reasons for geographic racial differences in stroke. So regards, it was a cohort that was designed in 2003. So a cohort is just like a research study where you recruit people, they're healthy at baseline, and then you're interested in seeing how things happen over their life course. So it was originally designed to look at whether there was differences in stroke between black and white people, right? But what our team did was say, you know what, let's use that same cohort because they already have this population, and then let's medically link their diagnoses and death attributed to cancer. Um, so what we did was we used these people were able to complete what we call like a food frequency questionnaire so that we can ascertain their diets, right? So we were able to develop these dietary patterns based on the things that they ate. So from these dietary patterns, we had certain patterns called like a Southern-based dietary pattern, which basically was characterized by people who ate, like your fried chicken, collard greens with ham hocks in it, mac and cheese. So like your traditional Southern type of diet. Another type of diet that was in there was uh, was a like a veggie based type of diet, like a vegetarian diet. So this consists of course eating leafy greens, different salads, um, just a very just think of someone who is more adherent to a vegetarian diet. So a reduction of eating meat products and things of that nature. So in the study, again, we wanted to see how your adherence to a certain dietary pattern was associated with dying from any cancer. And essentially, what we found was that those people who were more adherent to eating a southern-based dietary pattern had about a twofold increased risk of dying from any cancer. Right. So that basically just means that the more you ate a southern-based dietary pattern, right, compared to those who had a lower adherence to a southern-based dietary pattern, right, your risk went up by 100% if you were in the highest adherence group to eating southern-based dietary patterns. What do you think the association was for those people who um, were more vegetarian?
And
Processed
Was it
food.
associated with increased risk or?
it had to been I would say it had to been lower, like especially if you're adhering to their age, because with the Southern diet, you all were implementing age on that too.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Josh. So in epidemiological research, what we oftentimes do is we will do what we call adjust for or condition for certain factors like someone's sex, age, race, education, income. So we control. So if you can to hold everything consistent, right? So if I was to say holding your race, your education, all that stuff is similar. The only thing that we're looking at that's different is someone's diet. What is the observed effect that's associated with that diet, right?
Yep.
So we did account for age.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
for age. So ask your question again.
So what did you think the association was between people who had a higher adherence to I'm sorry, a vegetarian dietary pattern?
To the Southern one.
No, no, no.
I
Just
don't.
so it's just adherence to the dietary patterns. So in epi, we like to say the dose makes the poison. So too much of anything can be physiologically bad for you, right? So it was really you can have southern based like so when we say southern dietary pattern, we're talking about people who they eat that every day versus eating it every like maybe once a month, maybe. Right? And
That and,
then
so, and that would be considered like the more like fried foods, things of that
yes,
nature. Because that's what. Okay, okay.
yeah.
I would definitely say that the thing with this is kind of nuanced because there's so many different type of vegetarians. There's some vegetarians who eat basically just bare ultra processed foods. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're a vegetarian that's leaning more to like whole foods, I would think that the whole food vegetarian would be a healthier individual. I don't know if there would be much difference between the processed food vegetarian and the southern eater. That's just my opinion. I don't know.
So yeah. So I would also agree that if you're eating more processed foods, that's really where the inflammation is going to come from, right? Because we got to think about when foods are processed, what are some of the things that they do to preserve them? Right, they put a lot of sodium in it.
Yeah, chemicalized. Yeah.
But in short, Josh, the answer is that people who have the highest adherence to eating a vegetarian diet, so the more veggie based. So if you ate this like almost every day, healthy, leafy greens and other veggies, you had about a 30% reduced risk of
Wow.
dying of any cancer related disease. So it was that was something that we did before we looked at the food swamps. And this is again, it's interesting because in this study we were able to actually look at people's diets, and then these are individuals, and we were able to like kind of look at their 10-year risk of dying from any cancer, right? And like I said, it's all about this the dose that makes the poison. We also looked at within that same study whether like if you drink and consume more there was different dietary patterns. One of them was more so like alcohols and sugars, so people who like drink wine and have like, I don't know, some type of pastry with it every day, that was also slightly associated with cancer outcomes, but not as strong as what we saw with the southern based dietary pattern.
Yeah. Doctor,
I'm sorry, Josh. One second. The southern-based dietary pattern, just for my clarification, that would be the more the southern base would be like more the people who eat the swamp and the people who fall in those categories.
So again, to clarify, this is before we did so it would, in short, if we think about the southern dietary pattern, it was characterized by, again, like fried foods, processed meats, and if you did have like veggies, it had a combination of some type of meat product.
Pork or something.
So again, when I explain it to people, I just try to like think about just going to a good soul food restaurant and eating that. You got your mac and cheese, your cornbread. It's good, but if you're eating that every day, right? So the more, if you eat that every day, what we're, again, within this cohort of 30,000 people, we're seeing that it was associated with the cancer-related death. And there's a ton of things that again, between the diets and other things that we didn't measure, right? The fact that you brought up, are these people more likely to live in food swamps? Well, we didn't account for food swamps. We accounted for whether they were more rural or urban, but we don't know if it was, people live in food swamps, which make them more likely to eat these southern-based dietary patterns, which in turn increases their risk of developing obesity, and then it turns into cancer. Right? There's a ton of stuff in there that we weren't able to measure because this is an observational study. But again, there's a ton of evidence that kind of supports that the more unhealthy your diet is, right? So with processed foods and things that are, again, high in sugar and salt, it's not necessarily good for you. As I was saying earlier, obesity, higher BMI and obesity is a pro-inflammatory state. And we see that in itself is associated with the development of cancer, right? Because inflammation really is at the root of a lot of different diseases.
Yes, I realize that.
Justin, could you tell us about, I think it's pronounced colorectal cancer?
Colorectal cancer.
Yes. And this is the chest and the stomach cancer.
So
yes.
So colorectal cancer. Did you want to know about colorectal cancer or the chest and lung? So I can tell you about. I study colorectal.
Yes, colorectal. Yes.
So colorectal cancer. Again, with cancer, and is something that as a researcher we oftentimes try to explain to people that it is really when your body there's like a mutation, right, at a molecular level that gets out of whack, that gets out of control. So you can either have like a tumor suppressor gene that is not working properly, or there's a proliferation of cells and they become abnormal, right? And there's of course some inflammation that is there as well. But that's really what cancer is. It is mutations at a molecular level, right, for certain organs. And colorectal cancer is when you have those mutations, right, within your colon, which is like your lower stomach, like bowel area here, and your rectum, which is going towards where your waste products in your digestive system are excreted. colorectal cancer is a huge problem, right? Because it's one of the leading causes of death in the United States. Particularly early onset colorectal cancer, which is when people are diagnosed before the age of 50, is a rising public health concern because we're having more and
What's
more
the
people
youngest?
be
What's the youngest
diagnosed.
age?
Hmm?
What's the youngest age they have they diagnosed the colorectal cancer?
Some of my colleagues who are actual gastrointestinal surgeons and medical doctors, they're seeing people in their 20s and 30s, man. And this is something that it has been increasing over the past 30 years or so, right? I would also say that the research that we did, we looked at whether, again, these food swamps are associated with early onset colorectal cancer as well, and they are. I think that it has something to do, again, with the proliferation of unhealthy, as you said, y'all see earlier. There's within our country, there's a overconsumption, right, of food. Um, but it tends to be foods that are very deleterious for our health that cause a lot of inflammation. Um, and then again, we have the prevalence, right, of sedentary lifestyle and behaviors, right? So we're not moving our bodies enough. We're not growing our foods anymore, right? Our ancestors, this is like they were one with the land. They knew how to grow and garden their own foods. Um, and along with that, you're in the sun, right? You're able to get more vitamin D. You're active, right? Um, these are things that we don't do anymore, right? If I want to, I can drive to the nearest fast food restaurant and eat over 3,000 calories, and then I come back and then I'm sitting here on the computer and I'm doing work and I'm stressing, right? My blood pressure's going up. All right, this is not how
We
we
used to be. It used to like
yeah.
I
So
imagine we used to like go actually hunt for the chicken. Like
yes,
and, to the point where you had to put some work in for it. The most work you said now is actually getting in the car and getting it, and so. But
What I want to ask there is, what role do you feel like governmental watchdog agencies play in the proliferation of these type of food environments?
well, I have to speak on behalf of myself because I'm a representative of the university. But I would say that the government is. It depends on the community you're in, but the government, for the most part, when we look at a lot of what's happening within communities that have been affected by persistent poverty, right? By exploitation of its people, right? There's a lot of complicity when we think about that. Um, and a huge part of the work that I do is trying to be an active voice for change, right? Because I mean, I am American, and I feel like a big role is we have to get out, we have to vote, we have to do things that we can put people who are in positions of power that are from those communities that look like us, that are part of our families, right? Versus people who, of course, you don't care about a community if you've never lived there, if you don't look like the people, you don't have those same common stories, right? Um, so again, it's a bit of that, but then we also need to, historically speaking, the United States has not done well by African Americans and descendants of those people who were enslaved, right? Even like historically speaking, in medical research and in science, there's a reason that a lot of people don't trust public health agencies and universities, right? When we think about what happened with the Tuskegee syphilis study, right? So we're talking from 1932 to 1972, Black men were experimented on, right? And not given penicillin even once they had um, treatment for syphilis, right? And it harmed hundreds of people, right, and their families. Um, Even when you look at the Tulsa massacre and just so many things that have happened to Black communities throughout the history of the United States.
I recently read Medical Apartheid, so
Yeah, like there, like
I feel what
it
you're
is
saying. I feel what you're saying. Yeah, it's astonishing.
yeah, it is almost it's very American, right, to look down and exploit those who are disadvantaged, right? And the only way that we can make a difference is those of us who are from these communities, that we do that work, right, to continue to be a voice for our people, but then also work, right, and don't forget and do things that are within the community to uplift us, right, because we can't look for anyone else to. I'm sorry, but we really can't. It has to be us. We can't look for another person from outside. It starts with us. We have to work together, um, pool our resources, keep our dollar within our communities as long as we can. Oftentimes it's very difficult because here I am, I'm all the way in Lexington, right? And I'm in a predominantly white institution, but a very white space, right? And even building community here is difficult. Um, is oftentimes very difficult with my kids, right? Because when they go to school, they don't see as many kids that look like them. And this is all just because I'm good at science and I progressed my career, but then I left my neighborhood. So
Mm-hmm.
so even here, like you still try to build. I try to build as much community around me with people of color.
Okay. No, brother, I appreciate that highly. I feel you. I feel you all the way. Give thanks for that. Yeah. What another question I would like to ask is, okay, so the standard American diet, which I get to understand, is that the majority of American people eat ultra processed foods. Like it's a bulk of their it's a bulk of what they consume. Um, is it that much of a difference within these black communities, underserved communities, than the average population? That even though they do have access to these type of things, do they actually use them to where it makes a difference?
Oh, Yasu, I'm sorry. What was so are you saying that between like predominantly underserved
Yes.
Black communities and those communities that are more advantaged, is there what?
To certain things, do they actually take advantage of these resources like fresh foods? Because I'm just asking this because it's I'm reading that the majority of Americans tend to consume ultra processed foods.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't particularly done any. That's a study that we're planning to do to kind of look at whether living in a food swamp or living in a place that has that's less of a food desert, living in communities that are less disadvantaged, whether there's actually an association between that and healthier dietary patterns. I have not done specific research on that, right? But my hypothesis would be that if you live in a place, right, that has healthier food options, even if there's, you know, like just again Publixes and stuff like that, right? Like I can go there and for lunch there's hot food, there's things that don't have as much processed food, right, that I can buy for lunch and eat versus if I live in again a community that has more disadvantage where it's like I'm having to eat French fries.
So just
Uh,
by default, just having these options just by default puts
mhm.
you in a different bracket.
Yeah. It's it's much different than like again in my neighborhood. If I go to the gym, right? First of all, there's gyms. There's multiple gyms that I can go to, and then once I leave the gym, then there's options to like, oh, great, look at this. I can go to this tropical smoothie. Oh, and then there's another smoothie place, and then there's another place where I'm able to like get foods that are like literally just fruits and veggies and blend it up, and that's what I'm eating. Versus, yeah, if I go get a milkshake after I go for catch the train here, and like if you're in an inner city and like and you have the bodegas and stuff like that where yeah they have food, but it's the type of food, right? Again, it's ultra processed, but then again it's high in fats, high in sugars, sodas and things of that nature that again we know cause a pro-inflammatory state, and then this again leads to chronic and systemic inflammation, which then leads to development of cancer and other diseases, right? So again, I haven't done the specific research to make that comparison between the communities, but I feel safe making a hypothesis or an educated guess that yeah, if you live in a place that is more of a food swamp, you're more likely to eat foods that are deleterious for your health, right? So fast foods. And if you live in a place that has more food resources, then you're more likely to eat healthier.
I mean, I agree. It makes sense just by default, just by having the options. Because even if you're in one of these type of food swamp, food deserts, and you have the mindset to make a different decision, you don't have that option. So you have to choose out of what's there, which is everything is bad. So I agree. I agree. That makes perfect sense. Josh, you have anything to add in?
Yes. What the can you talk about smoking and how is that related to chest or either stomach cancer?
So when we talk about smoking, we have to, we got to be very clear. And I'm assuming that you're talking about tobacco use or tobacco products.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So
I'm talking about just smoke. Period. It's any form of smoke.
Okay. So I'll differentiate because there's what we call
hookahs, there's marijuana, there's cigarettes, there's okay.
So I'll
look at the vapes.
Go ahead.
Vape pens. Okay.
Ayasu, what was that? Ayasu?
No, I was adding vape pens into things.
Okay. So this is a really interesting conversation because all right. So when we think about smoking, combustible tobacco products, right? So that is anything that you can get from the tobacco leaf, right, that you burn, and tobacco itself. Tobacco is seen as what we call a carcinogen. I'm sorry, carcinogen. Word tumbled there. But it has been seen as a carcinogen since the 60s, early 70s, and it was deemed as a public health crisis, I believe, in 1964 or 68 by the U.S. Surgeon General, right? So smoking tobacco and tobacco products are highly correlated and associated, like causally. Like they're known to cause lung cancer and other cancers. It is like again in the late 20th century, it was one of like a huge public health burden, right? And still, it takes.
Well, I have a question about that.
Tens of thousands of lives, and that's tobacco products by itself. I'm sorry. What was your question, Josh?
Yeah. So my question is, does the data even does some of the epidemiology data changes due to society shifts? Like cigarettes at one point, they weren't on the list for like this health thing, like so cigarettes they weren't on the list at one point. So how do you all so when the field shifts from things being untracked to tracked, does that makes the how do you all go about that incorrect data or the data that needs to be changed? Like, because at one point I understand that they weren't putting like for smoking for instance, they weren't seen as a high risk health thing.
So again, this was smoking. Again, tobacco products was not seen as a high risk. It was very commonplace prior to the 1960s, right? Then even then, there was another 30 years or so to where it was normalized to like smoke in restaurants, smoke in public places, right? But over the past 2 decades, there's been a huge amount of policies to overturn that, because one of the things that we saw in terms of the research is that, well, tobacco smoke actually is associated with secondhand cancers. Secondhand tobacco smoke is associated with cancer development itself, right? Even today in 2025, I believe that smoking tobacco products are associated with about 19% of all cancers. 19%. Now, in terms of like, how do we do this look at this in terms of the data, right? We're able to go back and look at historical data, right? So the reason that they were able to look at smoking and tobacco and see that it was associated with lung cancer specifically is that there's like a 20-year lag. There's a 20-year lag between the initiation of tobacco smoking and then the development of early lung cancer, right? And they saw this from a national standpoint. So once tobacco products hit the market, let's say in the 20s and 30s, you can see in men in the 50s and 60s, there was this huge increase in incidence of lung cancer. And then we can also see it, like I wish I could show you all the figures here, but we can also see that around the 90s, is when there tends to be like a decrease in lung and bronchus cancer diagnoses and death, right? And this shifted right after this 1968, 1964, where that was the again classified as a carcinogen. Now, you asked earlier about other products. It is very unclear the relationship between, let's say, marijuana smoking. I would say that if you smoke marijuana, but then you're using a tobacco product, right? So this would be
like a blunt byproduct, yeah.
A cigarello or something that has tobacco in it. Yes, because they use, if you look at a cigarette and if you look at those products, there's tons of other carcinogens.
Yes. It isn't just nicotine alone.
Yeah, and that by itself. But if you were to smoke it alone, the evidence is unclear because it's very difficult to do research studies to really link, again, if people who only smoke weed or marijuana versus those who may do vape, and then we're talking about e-cigarettes, which are a new product.
Yeah.
And these actually came out when I was in graduate school as a public health student. It was a big deal because in 2011, 2012, that's when we saw the proliferation of, these e-cigarettes coming on the market as being something that's like a safer option for cigarettes.
Yeah.
Or an option for people to kind of have tobacco cessation. Hey, you do the e-cigarette, it still has the nicotine, which is actually a byproduct of, again, the tobacco plant, but nicotine is highly addictive, right? So one of the things that we're seeing now is that for a lot of preteens and teenagers and adolescents, they're becoming heavily addicted to e-cigarettes, mainly because of course, the nicotine and how much you're able to kind of, consume by having one of those vape pens. And then we've seen that this can be associated with then the adherence to or initiation of tobacco smoking products. Now, you also mentioned hookah. Again, if it has tobacco in it, I would say that yes, it's going to be deleterious. And if you consume about 20, what we call 20 pack years of smoking tobacco, right? This is considered like giving you high risk. So that means that you're smoking about a pack a day, every day for 20 years. Those people, if you smoke that much, then you need to have what they call lung cancer screening, which that is one of the only criteria to kind of that would classify you as being eligible for screening, is having about 20 pack years of smoking.
I like to add something. I ask a question at the same time. Okay, in the 1940s, 1950s, this is building on what the brothers are saying. Physicians endorsed cigarette smoking. Like, for instance, Lucky Strikes had thousands of surgeons who had a national advertisement program, basically reassuring the public about the safety of cigarette smoking, right? So the question I have around this now is the role of, now that you speak about all these new products that's now being unleashed to the market, just like then when the cigarettes wasn't as well researched, was unleashed on them. What role does government agencies play in unleashing these things on the public?
I don't know.
Where they allow it to just happen, and then along the journey they say, okay, we got to scale it back because people are dying. Like, how does it enter the market not knowing that these things could be so harmful to the health?
So this is Yasu, this is a great question, and I think this really leads to a larger conversation about capitalism.
Okay.
So when we think about just like our country, the history of our country, it was completely justified to claim that a person was 3/5 a human because they had our complexion, they had our melanin, right. 3/5, right? People were property. And when we think about systemic racism has been one of the most prolific tools used to weaponize, right, Black bodies, right, all right, so that it can be some type of major benefit and gain, right, for people who are capitalists, right, able to get cheaper and or free labor out of groups of people, right? That is a resource, right, that tons of people exploited. And so again, I think like when we think about racism, we think about just like how our society works. Capitalism, the dollar bill, is where it all ends and begins,
That's the
right?
incentive.
So when we think about the role, if we are not, like, as individuals and within our communities, we have to understand that that is the, like, the game in which we're kind of embedded in until we move away, right, from those systems and those norms. The government, us as a people, we're all complicit, right? Because really think about it. There's so much research, like when we think about the food swamps, but then we can think about what do you call it, predatory marketing within communities of color and underserved or disadvantaged communities, right? There's more advertising for alcohol, for cigarettes. When I
Yes,
was a kid, like, I'm not playing. When I was 8, 9, 10 years old, my grandmother was a smoker. Like, she smoked every day. She could send me to the store, and with the list and a note, and I can buy her a pack of cigarettes and bring it back.
I don't know if you remember the candy. I don't know if you recall the candy cigarettes.
The carton cigarettes.
Candy cigarettes.
The cigarettes that they I grew up in Brooklyn for the
candy
most part.
cigarettes.
No, the candy. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So
they had a little powder and you could smoke and get your blow a smoke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even when you think about the 40s and you think about 100 years ago, it was, even in our movies and in film, what would you see? Like, even in the 80s, they would have like an action scene. The good guy would take the cigarette, light it and then smoke it. That was a part of, again, media. Again, if the tobacco,
they built an aura around smoking.
Yeah, and again, so when we talk about government, I'm really, I think it's about capitalism, about the billionaire companies. It's about there are not restrictions even on the internet now, right? We have kids that are over consuming internet and media, and there is no, like, person that is or organization that's going to stop that, because as long as there's a want and a need and there's a product, right? We live in a system to where we're going to try to sell it.
So the things where most people feel that if something is in the public space for usage, that it's already been deemed safe.
Say it one more time.
The average person feels that once something is already placed in the public space for usage, whatever it might be, that's already been deemed safe. Yeah. That it's already been vetted and it's for their use at this point.
Yeah. I would say that be a critical thinker, and you have to do the research for yourself, and you have to watch everything that we consume, right? You have to be mindful of the environments that we're in, all right? Because just like these are yes, we do have laws and we have certain policies, but there's certain loopholes, especially when we talk about, again, just with tobacco and e-cigarettes, right? Oftentimes when you don't necessarily have the evidence, and this is why, if something is highly addictive, again, if let's think about tobacco, it has nicotine in it, and it's 100 years ago, there was no evidence to support that tobacco was associated with dying from anything. And then on top of that, there was like more immediate benefits, right? It reduces stress. It makes you gives you like this feeling of euphoria. It makes you feel better.
Yeah, a little rush.
Right. So that was like their argument for a while until we had evidence to support the other hand. So even with a lot of the e-cigarette products, I have never used one. I wouldn't recommend using it, because if it's something like that has nicotine in it, again, which is a byproduct of tobacco, it is something that is highly addictive, right? I don't trust consuming something that I know is heavily addictive, that if I was to remove it, then I'm looking, severely to try to replace it.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, mindfulness and personal responsibility is paramount. These organizations are pretty much not going to do anything for you.
Yep, exactly. And we have to look out for ourselves, right? So once we know better, right, it's good for us to kind of share this stuff with our own communities. We talk about this in the barbershop. We talk about this with our brothers and sisters, right? And oftentimes people like it's completely fine to question everything. I think that's why I'm a scientist. I question everything. And like I rely on data and evidence to kind of support the things that I'm seeing, but also understanding that things may change.
Right.
Well, yeah. So you have any more questions, yes, so before we head out?
No, I appreciate it, brother. You're brilliant. I was going to talk about ask you about seed oils for a little. I had seed oils on my I have seed oils on my list, because
like flaxseed oil, like which oils?
Like most of the seeds oil, like safflower oil, rapeseed oil, canola oil, all of the oils. Because I was reading something that was saying that in the 1960s, 1970s, diets high in omega-6 and polyunsaturated fatty acids such as safflower oil and other seed oils, as well as margarines, were recommended to reduce heart disease. However, long-term studies have now found that such diets decreased heart disease, that such diets didn't decrease heart disease, but they increased the total death rate and cancer rate, and also accelerated aging. So seed oil is a thing because I don't know. I find seed oil to be ubiquitous, like it seems to be everywhere. I've made a decision over the last couple of years to eliminate seed oil from my. I'm a vegan. I'm a long-time vegan already, but I decided over the past 2 years to eliminate seed oil because I was suffering from inflammation issues. So I decided to eliminate seed oil, and when I eliminated the seed oil, I didn't have as much issues as I once had. Like I found it ridiculous. But what I'm saying is that what I discovered just by doing this is that it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere, to the point that I told Josh that if it was a drug dealing situation, seed oil would be the cut. Like it seemed like that's where they make the money. So I would just say, like, do you think that this actually plays a significant role even in food? It's even in foods that are deemed healthy.
So Ayasu, you just clearly articulated a point that I feel like way more on this topic, and I actually respect the conclusion that you've gotten to, because honestly, right, when I said earlier, like the dose makes the poison, right? It is about what we consume, right? And oftentimes we have to listen to our like as a researcher, that's one of the things I'm going to leave people with, is like you have to listen to your body, right? If you're consuming certain oils, right, and oil is a precursor to what, triglycerides, which is a fat, these are things which are precursors to steroids and other inflammatory cytokines, right? And we know that pro-inflammatory cytokines, right, these are things that are in our body, right? Those things are associated with inflammation, which is associated with cancer and other diseases. I would actually argue that, if you have just the ability to be that conscious and mindful of what you're consuming and to be a vegan, that in itself, it's going to extend your life. Like what we're seeing in it, like when we look at the research and we look at the data, to have these healthy diets, right, to watch what you consume, it is going to reduce your risk of developing certain diseases. I struggle with trying to because of convenience in terms of like diet, right? Like get a quick salad here, but it still has ranch dressing and stuff of that nature on it, and it's still not as good. I don't, for me personally, like certain products they do cause more inflammation than others, right? So I actually fast at least once a month for
I've been doing that as well.
for at least a day, just to kind of cleanse my body, try to get rid of a lot of the toxins that may be in my body. But again, like I haven't I haven't personally so you mentioned the research, but I haven't personally seen as much evidence in the sense of like specific seed oils. I'm sure that there's a lot of literature on it. I haven't looked at that specific component. I know that again, if we go back to the study that I was talking about earlier, fried foods again, which is we're talking about grease and oils that cook these things. French fries, we know that these things are more deleterious for your overall health and well-being. But with that being said, some seed oils are really, really good for your skin. So
yeah. My point is that when I decided to try to get away from it, is I realized how it's difficult to get away from these seed oils because they're literally like everywhere.
Yeah.
So like there's only like a handful of products that you could find in the grocery store, the health food store, even ones that are deemed organic, that don't have these seed oils, either some rapeseed oil, canola oil, sunflower oil.
Yeah.
I've been trying to use like more like the what you call the olive oil, coconut oil, like the more like I've been trying.
Why are these oils supposedly bad? Why are these oils like vegetable oil, sunflower, safflower, cotton oil? Why are these oils supposedly?
So at least from my understanding,
ingested.
And y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but it's because of the complexity of the actual like the fat cells. And those chemical bonds, they end up being very, very hard for your body to like break down, right? So when you think about like when you consume certain things, the more complex a molecule structure, your body needs to use more energy to break it down to actually use it for energy.
Right.
So again, when you eat, it's like when you over consume certain things. If you eat more than a certain amount of calories, then your body, and if you're not working off a lot of that, then your body, it sits within you, right? And the only other ways that you're able to kind of get rid of it is through excretion and sweat, right? So again, a lot of it is it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's the dose. Like we eat too much, the dose makes the poison. We eat too much of the same things, and we're not burning enough of the caloric intake that we're bringing in. On top of it being like high, like a ultra prevalence of highly complex hydrocarbons and which are sugars and fats. So again, any like you, the thing to think about, all right, because it takes great strength and just self will, Ayasu, as you're doing to be a vegan, right? One French fry is not gonna kill you.
No,
it's a cumulative thing.
but if you're eating that bowl of French fries every
yes,
day, like it's like no, like you can't consume these highly. Again, as humans, we did not evolve right over time to consume that much. We used to have to hunt and gather, right? But our evolution of technology and food and genetically modified products, right? We in our, like, even if you think about the farming and you think about just like we produce a lot, right? So now, right, we can consume, like, again, I just had a lunch, I'm still full, and I had about 2,000 calories, and I don't need to eat again for the rest of the day. 100 years ago, like that would have been a meal I would have probably got once a year, right? And around holidays. But we do that every other day. So again, I think it's about, again, the dose making the poison.
I agree. Because these oils was marketed as oils that would reduce heart disease, as opposed to what people were using before would have been like the lard and the ghee and those type of things.
So in comparison, I think that they're what they're trying to do is the same thing that they're doing with, like, anytime you hear that, this is, if someone is trying to sell something, right? It's the same thing with like tobacco, right? So we had cigarettes, and then they invented e-cigarettes. This is a lower risk, it's a better alternative. But there's other things that we know, right? For certain, like this water, drinking a lot of water is also is going to reduce your blood pressure. It's going to be better for you, right? Getting your heart rate up for about 30 minutes a day to where you sweat. You're actually sweating, you're working out. Like, that's going to increase your quality of life and reduce cancer risk and heart disease. Um, Again, eating more leafy greens and veggies without having as much chemicals and products of that and things that taint the actual fruit or veggie, right?
Right.
Let's see, getting outside, getting more sunlight,
Absolutely.
like having healthy relationships, people that love
Absolutely,
you,
brother.
support
Yes.
you, around you,
Yeah, the
reading.
toxicity. Yes,
You know,
yes.
like there's a ton of
So
things.
many things, yeah. So
There's so
many
many things that we
factors.
know that are healthy, right? So like I oftentimes like try to focus on those things that can better your quality of life. Because even in my research, all when I say it lowers your risk, I'm just saying like we all die.
No,
It just
We know
it
this.
lowers
Yeah.
your chance of dying earlier
And
if
that's the
you
most. And
since we know that we all die, that's inevitable. Then the most tragic thing is a premature death.
exactly.
you're gonna go
Anyway, there's no going around it. So for you to leave before you get to experience whatever you need to experience is extremely tragic.
Exactly.
So it's not about trying to live forever. I don't. Maybe some people might be trying to, but I don't think that's fully what we're looking for. We're looking for a kind of higher quality life.
Yeah, so you're right. You want to increase your quality of life, right? So you want to be 50, 60, 70, 80, and you want to be able to like not have as much joint pain. You want to be able to like get up and go play with your grandchildren or great grandchildren. You want to be able to do things to where you're actually experiencing life versus having to have people take care of you and being kind of like a fraction of what you're able and want to do, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I do think that just being is great to be conscious of what you consume, where it comes from, right? And question those things and challenge, right? Because I think the more we think about that, and the more we question, like our diets and our lived experiences, it creates a better space
Right.
where we hold systems accountable, right?
Right.
Like again, you keep asking great questions about the government. I'm just gonna say like they're not being held like many institutions are not being held accountable because a lot of people just don't know or having these conversations or even know that they can challenge. Like again, just to kind of give you insight, when I was a kid, I was privileged enough to like when I met Josh and his family and Nigel, it was so elucidating and insightful to me because I was always questioning my community and my surroundings, right? But I was like in just like a regular hood environment. And so for us, it was like, like we were super poor, but like if we went to, a fast food place like a Checkers or Burger King, we're eating good if we get two burgers and some fries. Like that's good. Like I got food in my belly because we're hungry.
Right.
You don't think about what type of food. You're just happy that you got food, right?
Yeah.
So, but as I got older, like again, I saw the associations. I'm like, I don't, like you shouldn't feel so full to where you can't get up and move. And then it's also like a status symbol in many of our communities to where, like to ride in a nice car is a good thing versus I'm not going to be walking around town and like sweating. No, like I want to be clean, want to have a nice outfit and be in my nice car. So many of like the social norms that we have adopted, and I would actually say that it's systemic as well, right? Through music and through entertainment, right? A lot of those social norms are again deleterious and to the disadvantage of us. Uh,
Right.
it hurts us, and it wasn't like I was. It felt like it felt, what did you call it, Josh? It felt just so empowering, but then also validating. Again, when I met you and your family, right? And you all are Rastafarian, but then my wife, girlfriend at the time, is a vegetarian and had never eaten any meat, and exposed
Right.
to, like this healthy, conscious mind state. I'm just like, this is what I'm talking about. Yes, like the fact that we go to a restaurant is like, what do you put in that? Like yes, why don't we think that way? Why should you trust any organization or any institution with your own health?
Right.
Because it is a system that is purposefully designed for you to be dependent on it, but then you consume it, and then they have something down the road. Oh, you can take this drug or this medication for it as well. I can sell you,
Seems very intentional.
or you can get this surgery right here, right? That you need because you've been eating so and so food. So again, and now but I'm also, with all that being said, I'm happy that we're in the space to where at least exercise and a lot of influencers online are really thoughtful about like creating healthy food, so you'll see it. So there are spaces that people can now have that I don't think existed as much when I was growing up.
No, absolutely, it didn't exist. It didn't exist when you was growing up.
Yeah,
no, you're right. It didn't exist.
Yeah, the West End now was once a food desert. But once these stores like Tassili's, Soul Veg, they got Wadada, and they have slutty vegan, alternative vegan option. Once these stores came in now, it's also came in. It's also a wave of a different community coming in now. Once this food desert has built itself up from the root, it seems like there's a whole new push of people to come in to invest in the community once the desert became an oasis.
You have a strong point, Josh, because everything that we've said, I have to note that just like your family, there were things done within the community to self-correct. It wasn't like the people just sat around diminished. They did things. There were community farms, health food stores, different things, different community groups start doing certain things. But like I mentioned, when these things start to now change the landscape, it's almost gentrification time. You see, yeah, and that's what we witnessed, like in this particular part of the city. As soon as certain things start to so it wasn't like the black people or the just sat around and accepted it. They did things. I saw them doing things to change the situation. But so it's almost I almost want to suggest that this type of food desert, food swamps is almost like a form of redlining. Not almost, it is. It is a form of redlining. Yeah, because soon as the community does things to make those things no longer what it is, the community changes.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I actually do a lot of research. I actually have some studies that we've done look at the effects of redlining, historical redlining, on disease and how deleterious that is. So again, I'll just give a definition because as a scientist, we know what redlining is, but I don't know if people are listening know what that is. But redlining were a system of policies and laws that were implemented in the early 1930s after the New Deal that really disproportionate. They actually targeted certain communities, right, as being undesirable. Those are actually like the words that were put into these policies and laws. And what was it? The Homeowners Loan Corporation developed these maps, right, to where it can classify certain communities as being less desirable based on the racial ethnic makeup and immigrant population of communities, right? So if a community had Black people and Jewish people, they were seen as being undesirable. And as a result, it drove the property values down. But then also what they did was they were they exploited certain communities in terms of like their home loans, right? So they would charge higher rates. They would not give certain loans to people, right? So essentially what this did was it created like a hierarchy to where certain communities were seen as non-red line, but the desirable neighborhoods because they had a higher proportion of white people. The property values, they were maintained. But then in other communities where it was a higher density of Black people, Jewish people, and immigrant populations, they were lower property values, less likely to be approved for home loans and things like that. So redlining is interesting because in the majority of cities across America, right? I mean, you can go to almost every city across America. You can kind of see some of the residual effects. You can see the remnants of what redlining did, right? So like even in Atlanta, even though it's majority a black city, you can see the community that I grew up in Southwest Atlanta was predominantly black, right? But then there were less resources, less homes and houses that were inhabited, and there was less people who owned homes in our communities. And then you can go to another part of Atlanta, right? North Atlanta, Marietta, Buckhead. These places look and have more resources. You see that in, again, over 200 cities throughout America. You see the effects of redlining. Even here in Lexington, we had redlining. Is predominantly white. You had it in Louisville, which is up the street from Lexington. So did a study, I'm a researcher, do a lot of these studies where I wanted to look at whether the effects of historical redlining, right? So some policies that were implemented about 100 years ago, whether they were associated with two different diseases. I did one study where we looked at it in colorectal cancer, and then we did another study where we looked at it specifically in breast cancer. So for breast cancer, we wanted to see whether redlining was associated with developing late-stage breast cancer, but then also whether people died from breast cancer. And just because redlining happened a long time ago, I also wanted to account for a more modern measure of what we call social disadvantage. So we had this measure called, hey, Dr. Black.
Greetings. Sorry about the slowdown, you know.
Greetings. How you doing?
Man, I'm all right, brother. I had some power outage here, you know.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear.
All right, we're back up though.
Okay. Well, I was just explaining really briefly redlining and some research that I had did to see how that was associated with certain cancers. My name is Justin, by the way.
Yes, Justin.
Sorry. Do you mind if I continue or should I stop?
Yes, man. Continue, man. I've been following out in a different way.
Okay. So we wanted to see, and again, we here in Kentucky. Some of the research had actually been done before, where we looked at. I had some colleagues that looked at the effects of redlining in Atlanta and how this was associated with breast cancer. So some of my dear colleagues, Lauren McCullough, who's actually at Emory University, she's a Black woman from Atlanta, did this research with her team, and actually found that places that had also redlining, but then also contemporary disadvantage, right? So these are places that were redlined before, but then also are systemically disadvantaged today.
Okay.
And she found that those people from those communities had higher rates of what we call late stage breast cancer and more invasive breast cancers in Atlanta. I did the same thing here in Kentucky. Now, Atlanta is predominantly Black. So the population there is different. Lexington, for the most part, is less Black. I think it's about 10% African American here. So I wanted to see these effects of redlining, but then also how a more contemporary measure of social disadvantage was associated with breast cancer. So what we found was that if a person was from a redline community, that it was associated with a higher risk of dying from breast cancer. It was also associated with later stage disease as well. What was interesting is that this effect was primarily in non-Hispanic white people, white women. When we looked at the effects of redlining in Black women, there was no association here in Kentucky. I will say that a big part of that, right? Because oftentimes we see these results, we're like, okay, so what could potentially be going on? But one of my hypotheses is that, well, for Black women that are living in Kentucky, regardless of whatever neighborhood or community that you come from, your treatment or the type of healthcare that you have is much different than your white counterpart, right? And this can be attributed to some of the, again, implicit and explicit biases that you may have from healthcare professionals, or just and then other lack of resources within your community. So even as a Black woman that may be in a high income neighborhood versus a woman living in a lower income neighborhood, we're not necessarily seeing differences in their outcomes for breast cancer. And again, a lot of it can be attributed to the fact of all of these other things that are going on within their lived experiences that make them disadvantaged as a result of their race and systemic racism. But I love to talk about the effects of historical racism and redlining, but then also how social disadvantage now influence white women's health, because I think it speaks to a larger picture of capitalism, right? And how it's deleterious for everyone's health, right? If you create these laws and these patterns and these norms that prevent people from having the resources that they need, regardless of their color, you're going to see negative health outcomes, right? So the fact that we see
Sure.
that in non-Hispanic white women, it kind of proves like, hey, like living in communities that don't have the resources, right? Don't have a certain number of primary care physicians, don't have healthy food that's available, access to exercise, lower income, people are struggling to make ends meet, right? You're having, even if you get medications, you're having to make this guesstimation within your mind on whether I'm going to spend money on medical care cost, or if I'm going to, keep my lights on and pay for food. People having, even if you get diagnosed with the disease, if you don't have the income, then you're having to, again, like it can make you bankrupt. It can cause you to, like, have so much in healthcare costs to where that is causing stress, and then it
Right.
leads to more negative health outcomes. So
What I ask you, brother, is um gentrification as a form of reverse redlining, for instance, like how you say you grew up in the Southwest. Can you hear me? You grew up in the Southwest. That's a wonderful thing. Because this very community, the Southwest that you're talking about now, is in the throes of gentrification. So
yeah.
now you find farmers markets showing up. You find a belt line for walking. You find all of these resources that
didn't exist before, but all of a sudden now they're popping up in droves that the community is changing. So that's why I was suggesting that
it's a form of reverse redlining, because now they're putting these things in the community now that they're intentionally changing who lives in the community.
But so as you were saying, Yasu, is the issue is with gentrification is that it displaces the people who are natives or who were living in those communities. So then they don't benefit, right,
Right.
for the addition of all of those resources, right? They're then being displaced, and having to live in communities that may still have the same lack of resources.
They
So
pushed into the same lack. Yeah.
so
So
so it yeah. So gentrification, it primarily helps the folks who are able and privileged, right, to have the financial means, which again, historically speaking, those who've always had are going to have better health outcomes. Um,
that's one question after you is
okay, so when you do all this research that's put together and all of these different stats and information and numbers, is there a government agency, and I know I keep going here again, or a non-government agency that actually uses this information to somewhat the benefit of the people, to like sort of change things, or is it all on the people?
so I'll speak to y'all as a brother, so because I think that for us, it's like it. I've always been the type to where it's like if it's something that I want to change, I'm looking for it to be with me and what I can do for my own community, my own people. Looking for this ubiquitous government to do anything for me, it is, you have to realize that the government are other people, right? So yeah, we'll go ahead and ask your question one more time. You were saying what? You were
I was suggesting that with all the information that's gathered, that like, so it's not a conspiracy theories
oh
this thing that's
yeah.
going on.
So my answer to that would be, when I think about it, right? There are what we call like certain grants that are available that are afforded to where we can apply. Um, so the issue oftentimes is that based on who is leading, right? Right now, our nation is led by a person who is an obvious, bigot and person that has said things that are, anti-black. Um, you can't. It affects. It has a trickle down effect on like the resources. So for instance, one of the things that I'm trying to do as a way to mitigate some of these issues is I'm working on a grant that focuses on a gardening intervention, right, to reduce stress among people who are at risk of developing different cancers, right? So the idea is that if we teach people how to garden, right, we can reduce allostatic load or stress, right, through two means. They're going to be outside gardening, so you're going to get more physical activity, more sunlight. It's going to reduce inflammation and stress that way. But then also now you're being more conscientious of the food that you're eating because you're growing tomatoes, you're growing your own veggies, right? And you're able to take that from garden to your table, and and that alone with teaching people about nutrition, teaching people about their diet, right? That could be a way that we can do groundwork at the community level, right, to try to mitigate some of the disparities that we see. Now, in terms of research, things like that are way more difficult to get funded by the national government because it's a sustainable intervention, right, which focuses on empowering people, teaching and equipping people with the resources and means to do for themselves and reduce their consumption of pro-inflammatory food. Um, but even with that being said, we can still do some of the preliminary work together, right? Like heck, even some of the organizations. When I met Josh, what was the name of the organization that Nigel was a part of? Habasha, right? Like I think that is a great example of doing the work, creating the interventions within the community to really try to mitigate the disparities and inequities that we see. The issue is that, like trying to get the funding from a national standpoint is really difficult. So it really does take groundwork and us as individuals coming together with, just like similar interests in bettering our communities. Like that's one of the ways I think that we can try to mitigate some of the, the negative health outcomes that we see in our communities.
Nice.
Dr. Black, give thanks. Just to include you in the conversation. So, as a man living in Jamaica right now, if you were to enter into this next environment, according to the numbers, I think you would lose about 6 years. You would lose about 6 years just based on not having to do anything but just being in this particular environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. Greetings, Justin. Greetings, Ayaso. Greetings, Josh. Yes, still here on the island. It's island, land we love and to hate, Jamaica.
Mhm.
So
yeah.
the island speaking about health among in the black communities and the effects of gentrification and capitalism
The health
on this.
Disparities between the food deserts and the food swamps and things of that nature.
And we
Yes.
still got a few minutes because we've been. I know we said an hour for Dr. Justin. We're going 30 minutes over, so we can get a few more
So
questions in.
yeah, man. So
Yes, sir.
Justin,
Yes, sir.
my interest in the cancers and the struggles of the black people and them food and thing. My interest is the cancers that create the prostate problem. And the prostate seems to be very specific to black man.
Mm-hmm.
You have any research material on that and solutions?
So I don't have a ton of research that have specifically looked at risk factors for prostate cancer.
Yeah.
But I have a broad and general knowledge about prostate cancer. There are a few studies that we're putting together to try to come up with therapies or ways to provide more social support for men who are diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, prostate cancer is a really interesting cancer because it is one of the most curable and livable cancers that there is out there. So what I mean by that is if you get treatment and if it's caught early enough, more than 90% of people who are diagnosed with prostate cancer are going to live and survive the cancer. The issue in lies where there's recurrent disease. So when it comes back up, and then for those people who don't necessarily get screened and get finding early on or get treatment for it. And so oftentimes when we look at disparities between black men and other people, is really about the time and delay in treatment. A lot of it is about whether we're actually getting health care. Sorry about that. But a lot of it is about us actually having engagement with the healthcare system to actually get treated for it. Because one of the treatments for is prostatectomy. which is a very, it's not too invasive, but it's a surgical procedure.
Yeah.
And it's associated. I'm sorry.
Before you get to the treatments, what is our information on the cause? Because it
Uh,
appears as though it's something that has been hitting black man right
yeah.
across the world, Jamaica, the Caribbean. Is it our diet? What does it have to do with our food?
So again, Dr. Black, I don't have much knowledge in terms of like the specific etiology of prostate cancer, and I apologize.
Yeah.
Like I can look it up and do some and read a little bit more literature, and I can share it with you. But I would say that in terms of like just like the disease itself is inflammation, right? So
Right.
as we've been talking about before, right? One of the major differences that we see between race disparities is that, well, people of color, we tend to have more chronic physiologic stress and higher loads of inflammation when compared to our non-Hispanic white counterparts. And a lot of this can be
Because
attributed. Mhm.
yeah,
So
go ahead. Attributed.
a lot of this can be attributed to certain social norms like diet and nutrition, but it can also be embodiment of stress from our environment, right? It can be environmental exposures and toxins. For prostate cancer specifically, I don't know if there's like a primary agent or carcinogen that is responsible for all the cases. Again, it's one of those cancers that is highly curable. So when we see the difference between in terms of incidence, I don't know what's causing that, but in terms of mortality, a lot of that would end up being the lack of care that we get in the treatment. So in terms of
So
incidence,
could it be attributed just into lack of resources again?
yeah. So that's what I'm
Lack of
saying.
lack of like medical care, medical attention.
Exactly. So that's
Because
what I
you
say.
say
Like,
if it's the most curable cancer, but yet black men die disproportionately of it, so it seems to be like an economic thing more than anything else.
and again, this is a story that we tell oftentimes in the cancer world altogether, right? Because it's one of the same things that we even see in breast cancer. So breast cancer there are certain biomarkers, right? That if you have a certain genes called BRCA, like if you have a certain mutation, then you're going to be at an increased risk of developing breast cancer, right? Same thing in men. If you have that mutation, right, you're going to be more likely to develop cancer. But another issue is that we saw about 40 years ago, once we got more medical and technology and we're able to come up with certain treatments and drugs and therapies, that is when we saw this disparity between black and white women in terms of breast cancer start to increase. Once the treatments and stuff became available, there was a difference in the treatment right availability between races, which then drove the disparities that we now see, which is why if you're a non-Hispanic white woman, you have a 92% 5-year survival probability after being diagnosed with breast cancer, while for a black woman, right, it's about 78 to 80% 5-year survival probability. Again, oftentimes in black people, we're usually diagnosed with later stage disease, right? So that means that it's usually metastasized and it's reached other organs in your lymph nodes. And then
Too late.
we usually also have a different molecular or tumor subtype, which in turn means that the treatments that we get are less effective. And a lot of this is the result of us being left out of research experiments, certain like having the availability of doctors that look like us, right? That we feel comfortable with engaging with, social norms, like our cultural norms and stuff being implemented within healthcare, right? There's just so many different things from what we call a social determinant of health or a social driver of health standpoint that put us at a disadvantage, which drives those differences. But again, in terms of the causes, like we can get into like several carcinogens, but for prostate cancer, I don't know the specific main carcinogens for that one.
Doc.
I would suspect that the black people in America and the white people in America, outside of those disparities that we reason about, pretty much have the same kind of diet and are pretty much exposed to the same level of toxins. So I would suggest that those toxins are the things that form of diet, coupled with the sedentary lifestyle, could be the things that initiate the cancers. But the thing that sustain the cancer and make the black people seem to have it more than others would be those. First of all, especially in the case of America, it seems like black men have I don't want to say adversarial, but they don't have a good relationship with the medical industrial complex. Most black men don't go to the doctor unless they absolutely watch. Some of them you have to drag them off of the concrete to carry them to the police. They won't go. But it's not irrational, because like as you do certain research, you realize that they haven't been very kind to them in mass. So I think all of that plays a role. I don't know exactly, but I believe all that is significant.
Can I share a cultural analysis of the cause of this? One of the causes, because you mentioned the environment, of course, and your access to facilities and all of these things. But in Jamaica, where the prostate thing is probably the highest in the world percentage, it forces I to look into the diet more than anything else, because the conditions may be similar. Yes, the stress and all of these other things that we speak about. We say when I am and search through all of the foods, there's one food I arrive at that I don't have any explanation for its value in our diet, but it is deep in the country. It's in our national diet. It's part of our national food. This thing is called ackee.
Give thanks, doctor.
I am of the view, without that all that type of information that you have with practical technical analysis in the lab and so on, I have not found the value of ackee, and I'm being left to consider if that is one of the key points of the toxins. In other words, to eat ackee, you have to corn it with salt just to taste it, and we boil it up in oil. I don't have the scientific insight, but it's just my intuition. I'm saying ackee connected to our, our affinity to be affected by the prostate. Sounds weird, but I need some information on the impact of ackee on our system.
Well, only thing I can add to that, doctor, is that I know it's anecdotal, but I know for sure that it grows in Haiti and it grows in certain parts of Africa, and they do not consume it.
Yes.
They pass it every day and they do not consume it.
So Dr.
I'm very concerned about how this was inserted into our concept of a national dish. So the whole nation, our entire nation now suffer from whatever effects ackee have. Our men are heavily influenced by the ackee. And I'm saying it go right to the prostate without much evidence.
So Dr. Black, like as you were mentioning, and we had that conversation earlier. So I looked up some of the general risk factors for prostate cancer, and it's a lot of the things that we've been mentioning earlier, right? So age, of course, as you get older, age is a risk factor because your body starts to not be able to control mutations at a molecular level as much, cellular senescence and just aging itself. But then also obesity, right? So prostate cancer is associated with obesity, and then diet, as you just mentioned, right? So one of the things that we kind of discussed a lot tonight is, well, with certain diets that are more adherent to like higher concentrations of sodium and fats, right? It creates a pro-inflammatory state, right? So if you have a ton of these of salt within your body, it causes all this inflammation, which in turn causes this cascade of cytokines, which in turn leads to the development, right, of cancers over the long run. So I would say that like those are like the main things that people look at. But one of in terms of identifying, one of the easy things that you can do is you can get what they call a PSA test, a prostate specific antigen test. You can ask for a doctor to do one of those tests, and if you see differences to where, let's say, you're increasing in volume of prostate specific antigen from one year to the next, then it can be one of the early signs of development of prostate cancer. Now, again, with prostate cancer, it's one of those things that if you catch it early, you get treatment, there is more than a 90% probability that you will survive. The issue is that our people, we just, on average, we don't necessarily have as much resources, and we don't necessarily have the same rapport, right, with healthcare
Yeah,
systems.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
honestly, it makes sense, right? As we discussed earlier, right, in the United States, but then globally, right? When we think about Western society, in the United States, there has been purposeful actions that have been heinous crimes towards groups of people that look like us, and it makes it difficult, right, to have a trusting relationship with the
With the
clinician
meds.
person, and then especially when you're having to deal with interpersonal, person-to-person racism or implicit biases, to where you go in and they're speaking to you a certain way because you don't speak with the
Yeah.
same accent,
I
or you
see.
don't have the same norms as them, right? These are things that we need to systemically make sure that we do better at in the United States. And I think it, again, having these conversations, making sure that we have more representation in terms of Black doctors and brown
I,
doctors.
I like to add that people tend to be more vulnerable when they're sick, when they're not
Yes,
healthy. For
yeah,
a man that's usually robust, when he's not healthy, he's more vulnerable. So to be subjected to somebody that might be aggressive or not sympathetic towards you is a whole nother situation.
yeah.
Different ball game. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and
yes.
I suspect to a certain level, doctor, that it might be a similar climate, not exactly, but similar in their environment as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in our environment now, it is the money thing becomes very obvious for treatment.
Truth.
You know, to the extent where people will fly to Miami for treatment.
Okay.
So the medical system now within our Jamaican framework, as I am saying, enough man don't like to go to doctor, you know. And the women are conditioned to go to the doctor because they are pregnant and they have the menses and they form a personal relationship oftentimes with them doctor. The male now, we're not really in the doctor unless we have
You
to, you
have
know.
to. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, they gotta pick you up and
Yeah.
carry you go there.
Yes, in other words, generally we don't trust the medical system. There's a
Absolutely.
deep historical
Mm-hmm.
mistrust and a
Yes.
greater trust in the herbs and the bushes and the rituals that we have that are, you know, coming from our retentions.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But what really nagged me about this, the prostate. A lot of my personal brethren, them, I know them now in them 60s, and I knew them when in their 20s. And half of them tell me, boy, my prostate in a dandy, it's prostate. And I'm saying, if it's specific to black people, I mean, to the extent of when we're comparing ourselves to the Caucasian race, it seemed to be something. Well, I don't know, brethren. It shouldn't be a part of us. So why we can't I pick it up at age in our teenage life? Can we pick up these symptoms in our teenage life? Why we have to get to 40 and 50 to
Could it be that
determine
it
whether
pick
we
up?
have?
Could it be, doctor, that it pick up in the teenage life and just manifesting later on in life? Like, because I know cancer and things not an overnight thing.
Yeah. So
It's a
Right.
cumulative thing. It take a while to show up.
no, so Ayasu, you're hit the 100% correct on that. So with cancer, um, it is often cancers. Most solid tumors take decades to manifest.
Mm.
Um, there are some cancers that are more congenital, that happen earlier in your childhood. So like these are like your childhood cancers and your leukemias. So like your blood cancers and things of that nature. Those are more like genetic mishaps that occur within populations, and that can be from environmental exposures and pollutions, or it can just be just something that happened genetically speaking, that cause, like, so it can be a mutation that caused the person to develop the cancer. But with things like prostate, lung, breast, colorectal, melanoma,
Years.
You've been walking around with it for a while. You've been walking around with it for a while.
what it's
Yes.
like
Yes.
is again is it so cancer, like, it's gonna sound weird, but
Mm.
mutations are like a natural part of like our physiology as humans, right?
Say that one more time, Justin. I'm sorry. Say that one more time. I missed it.
So mutations are something that naturally occur. They're occurring in your body right now, like all the time. The issue is that your body loses control of those mutations. So when you go outside, you get UV radiation that hits your skin, but then you have melanin that protects you and it keeps it from turning into something that maybe like melanoma. It heals and it repairs. Your DNA is repairing it, and it does it in a proper way. For certain groups, if your body is consistently under stress, right? So like if you have higher inflammation because of obesity, if you have higher stress because of systemic racism or whatever it is, where your heart rate is up, your blood pressure is up, everything is working in like a fight or flight mode, right? It makes it to where, like you just said, to where mutations, you're more vulnerable, right? Because when like an antigen or whatever hits your body, you're less likely to be able to recover from that. But with cancer specifically, it is for most of the solid tumors, these are things that tend to manifest over decades of exposure, right? So that's why, like with lung cancer, we know that radon is associated with lung cancer. We know that tobacco smoking and tobacco products are associated with lung cancer. We know that coal, right? So pollution from coal is associated with lung cancer, right?
What's associated to the prostate now? What are some of the things associated to the prostate?
So with prostate cancer, as I was just saying, I looked it up. We're talking about obesity. We're talking about age in itself, right? We're talking about environmental exposures, smoking, also alcohol. Those things are almost always associated with many solid tumors. So if you are having a higher consumption of these different products from, again, alcohol, smoking, higher pro-inflammatory diet, right, is going to leave your body at risk because you're having a more baseline systemic inflammation compared to a person who does not have the systemic inflammation that's going on within their body. So I think it is like a part of like the environmental harms that we're subjected to, but then also a lot of the social norms. And then once you get the disease, if you're not able to completely mitigate that with intervention and therapy, right, then your risk when you compare yourself to, our non-Hispanic white counterparts, you're going to see more people die, right, because of all of those other different harms in terms of the social determinants, right? So diets, stress, all of those different things, right? But then also we're talking about the medical care and the treatment, right? So, for instance, Black people are less likely to be in clinical trials, right, for research studies because of mistrustworthy behavior by health and research institutions, right? So if we're less likely to be in a clinical trial, then when they're trying out those drugs, they're not necessarily like they may not be as efficacious within our population because of the certain norms that we may have, right? We may not take the medication the same way as another person, but then also the things that we are consuming. So the may be different in our body than it be in someone else's body, right? So when it comes to treatments, well, yeah, the therapies may not be as effective in a Black person because then the clinical trials weren't designed or weren't inclusive of Black men and Black women in the first place. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
A lot of science. Yeah, I know we're heading on to a lot of science was due to that. They had to go in and I guess fix up because it was false information. Even the size of certain skulls, they had to go back and fix the science.
Yeah, that's pseudoscience. Yeah, you're talking about phrenology and all that stuff. That is pseudoscience. Oftentimes, again, is correlation and not causation. It was medical racism and bias. You have people who believe in eugenics and actually. So when we talk about race, I also want to just put this out here because as a social epidemiologist, I look at race as a social construct that biologically speaking, we have a lot in common with like white people than we do that are different. There are genetic differences in the terms of certain mutations, but more than 99.9% of our DNA are the same, right? We just have a different phenotypical presentation, right, because of our melanin. But race is a social construct, and you can even see across the diaspora of Black people, a Black person can be as white as Mariah Carey, but then as dark as Eddie Murphy, right? So when we talk about race in terms of health and health outcomes, we're oftentimes talking about the byproduct of lived experiences as a result of systemic discrimination and racism.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And the fact is that this is purely anecdotal, but this is just from my observation since I realized that a lot of these cancers, especially the tumors, are cumulative. So I have to say that it seemed like diagnosis is the death sentence because these people have been walking around with this cancer for a minute, but soon as somebody confirms that they have the cancer, it's a wrap. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking like maybe, I mean, I might be a little ignorant, but it seemed like not knowing that they had the cancer, some of them were just dealing with slight pains, but the minute that they realize it's confirmed that they have these things, it's not much long before they, because like I say, doctor, all the brethren who have these things, they've had these things for quite some time.
So I wouldn't say that you sound ignorant at all. I think that, again, we have to really think about the psychology of being Black in a world that is anti-Black. so we, like, as a young boy, I was taught to, like, as a Black man, that to be strong is to conceal my pain. If I'm on a football field or a basketball court, if you hurt, you better don't cry. You just walk around. You keep you to be tough, to not cry, and to provide and be that person that is the caretaker for your community. That is what it's meant to be. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of other negative stuff that through the media, through, just rap stars and entertainment that I didn't necessarily buy into. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there are certain what we call social norms, like things that we condition ourselves to be truths about how we carry ourselves, right, as Black men. So you just mentioned a few things, right? People usually walk around and have symptoms. You notice that when you urinate, that it's more infrequent, or is more frequent, or that it's painful, or that the stream is not as strong as it used to be, or that, man, that really does hurt there in that area. But what do we tend to do? We're just like, no, I got work. I can't take off.
You got to keep it moving, bro. You keep moving,
right?
Yeah.
So when we're having those experiences, those are all early indicators of, hey, your body's telling you, hey, Ayasu, hey, Josh, hey, Dr. Black, hey, Justin, something is going on. You feel it. You have to do something about it as early as you can, because as you just said, oftentimes what happens in our communities is that people, heck, what do we do about it? Where's the place that I go? How many of us actually have a doctor that knows us by our first name, that knows us intimately, that knows your medical history, that you trust, that you have a relationship with, that you can talk to, not in the doctor's office, but at home or at the bar, right?
No. Doctors and police officers are adversarial. We don't have partnerships with these individuals.
So the fact that we don't have those partnerships in itself is going to make it to where once you find out, or once you have that interaction, it becomes almost fatal. As soon as we have an interaction with a police officer who's not from our community, who may be of a different race, they feel somehow inclined that, hey, this person is harmful to me. But no, you're not. Like, I'm same thing with the doctor. You don't know a person.
Can I make a small intervention?
Yes, sir.
My mother was a nurse, professional nurse from ever since. So I'm as a youth, I always used to interested in our medical books and read it and so on. And I heard about cancer early, like 5 years old. I hear about cancer, people having cancer. My mother would come home and talk about the big C. Oh, the patient had the big C. And that was like an automatic death sentence. What really is a cancer? Can we clarify that? What is a cancer?
Yes, sir.
So what is that? Yeah, what is it?
So, Dr. Black, a cancer, as I was trying to describe earlier, and at its simplest form, it is a genetic. It's like a mutation at the molecular level, right? So what happens is your body has these cells that it develops and that naturally kind of mutate or naturally copy themselves. But for many cancers, what happens is that there may be a mutation that occurs that doesn't necessarily have what we call the right process to stop it, right? So there's certain molecules that, like a tumor suppressor gene, that if something was to happen improperly, right, with the mutation, it will shut it down. So right now, your body is like producing new stem cells, new blood cells, new cells within organs that are like it happens every day. It's like how we grow, right? That's how kids go from being a baby to big. But the difference is that for people who develop cancer and those who don't, is that certain organ cells or certain cells within the body, they continue to grow and they're not corrected by your body, right? And this can be as a result of a lack of what we call like a tumor suppressor gene, or it can be an influx of human growth hormone or some other type of biomarker. Okay. And then over time, that cluster of cells ends up growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger over time, to where it ends up taking resources from other organs and then it spreads
Other
itself
areas. Okay.
throughout your body. So then you have this, like, so if it starts in your prostate, it starts off as just an amalgamation of just a little bitty cells that are just growing, and it's inflamed at first, right? So it's causing like the cytokine storm and all that and things of that nature. And then over time, it just continues to grow. It continues to grow, and then it gets into your lymph nodes, it gets into your bloodstream, and then it sends those same deleterious cells to other parts of your body. And then it goes to the prostate, to another part of your body, and then that's when it becomes more invasive and metastatic, right? And
Justin, this is what our youth need to have outlined to them from about age 5. What you are outlining now, our youths, our community need to know this from about age 5.
Yeah,
that we demystify, that we drive out the fear that we have in ourselves about what is cancer and how to sell, and get it more scientific as an approach, you know?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's something that like you kind of learn in school, but they teach you biology, but they don't necessarily teach you just like the underpinnings of what like cancer is, right? It's something that you learn.
Black people need to know. The black man need to know about the underlying thing about of the prostate. The most, with all the various cancers we have, our one specifically seems to be what is haunting us is the prostate.
I'm sorry.
So maybe we as black people, we need to put a little bit more effort into helping to bring that consciousness to the race in general and to the solution ultimately. You know? Yeah. We need a specific program just to deal with the prostate cancer of black man.
Sure. I want to add just in what you mentioned there, the role of environmental toxins, external toxins, like for instance, heavy metals in the bloodstreams from processing, and just basically just the environmental toxins that the individual have no control of. Like, how do you factor in, or do you factor in those things in certain cancers, especially like I'm suspecting that even in Dr. Black's environment, that could be a significant role too, because as much as the island is beautiful, there's a lot of those type of things going on as far as certain.
Yes, right.
Jamaica is
the pollution is deep.
Help me, doctor. The thing that they used to make the oh man, help me, the foil. The thing that they used to make the foil.
Oh, the aluminum.
Aluminum. Yes, sir. Give that. The aluminum. I know this was like a big industry for a long time, mining aluminum from the island. So I'm just suspecting that maybe all of these things, because environmental racism, if you don't mind, is a thing. That's a thing also. Where certain environments that seem to be more barraged with certain toxins, that's not the people making of their own. They didn't make it, they're just subject to it. So I'm just saying,
maybe it's connected to.
Yes, doctor.
Maybe it's connected to the whole capitalist infrastructure, superstructure that we live under. Because you mentioned it earlier, you know?
Yeah, Justin did touch on that earlier. Yes, sir, he did.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is a global capitalist structure that have us in these environments wherein we suffocate because of the extraction of our resources, and the population, we suffocate.
Yeah, because I read something recently that suggests that children that are born in this era are born with heavy metal in their bloodstreams.
Yeah, man, in the center of the country, in Manchester, where the mines are, and the backside, the ground has been dug out, and no compensation. People here are sick in that area, but because the lack of resources, as you say, to get the medical attention, and that whole cycle kicks in. Nobody pays attention. Nobody can afford to pay attention to their illness. You know.
So if you all have like 5 minutes, I want to share something with you all
Yes,
on my
please.
screen real quick, because you all touched. So I had the privilege of doing a ton of research in my early research career here. But you mentioned environmental racism, pollution, and things. But specifically, you kind of touched on bioaccumulation. Bioaccumulation is like when, again, we think about the overconsumption, but like our food products and things that we have in our environment, they have certain metals. Right. So if you eat certain fish every day that are exposed to a ton of mercury, then you get a bioaccumulation of mercury within your body. Right.
Oh yes.
Right. So it causes you to have deleterious health effects over your life course. Right. Same thing as if you live in a town that has a chemical waste plant or some like some plant that's nearby, and there is no mitigation of that pollution from your environment, then it may get in your soil, it can get in your water. Right. We're seeing in different parts throughout the United States, right, that people who are living near areas that have more pollution are more likely to develop cancer. So real quick, I did a study where, let's see if it'll let me do it here. Let me see if I can show it to you. All right. Can you all see this here? Yeah. No?
Nothing yet. Is there something I can do on my end?
Let's see if it'll let me do it. Oh, it won't let me do it. Okay, it won't let me do it because I'll have to restart Google.
Okay.
But and I'll just keep it quick. But we did a study where we wanted to look at whether for the communities that had what we call higher particulate matter exposures to pollution. We did this in the United States. Whether that was associated with people who died from lung cancer. And I wanted to show you an image because like I made these maps to kind of really show. Yeah, I kind of want to show you all because I feel like the maps allow. Let me see if it'll let me do it.
Yeah,
I may have to log off and get back on.
Yeah, even if you can log back in, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, in the meantime, you know, I never knew about the concept of medical apartheid until the pandemic, you know.
Doctor, yes, sir.
Yeah, man, the pandemic exposed so much things, you know.
True.
I never knew that there was medical racism.
Yeah, I came across a document by a sister named Harriet Washington, where she wrote a book called Medical Apartheid, and she went in depth. It's actually very much worse than I even thought.
Yes, but boy, dread, you know, we're under some oppression that we don't even understand where we're under, you know, brother.
Yes.
Yeah, man, for decades and centuries, you know.
All right, I'm trying to share. I don't know if you all can see.
Oh, I can. Let me add it to the stage. There we go.
Okay.
Can you see this paper?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, so about 10 years ago, I wanted to do a study because you all mentioned environmental, you know, toxins and pollution. So yeah, I'm interested in how our environment influences our overall health. So I was able to do a study where we linked this relationship between particulate matter 2.5. So that's 2.5 micrograms per meter cubed. Basically, what that means is that when we think about particulate matter, this is pollution that is a result of like exhaust from cars, right? Power generators, industrial activity, biomass burning. You think about like plants, landfills, places where, again, you may have a lot of heavy metals and then they get into the soil and get into the water, right? Things of that, like, so we're talking about that type of pollution. The thing is that with certain pollution, it gets into the air, right? And it gets to where it is something that is breathable, and these fine particulates can get into your lung, and it can get into your your lung and your chest through breathing it in, right? But the issue is that, well, it gets in there, but then it's hard for your body to excrete that out, and then it causes inflammation, and it causes accumulation of certain harmful cells, and then over time there's a development of cancer. So that was like
Justin, sorry, would those be the same things that they call VOCs?
Yeah. So volatile organic compounds. Yeah.
Okay.
So kind of, yeah. So yeah, in the same house as those things. Yes.
Okay.
So again, when I'm talking about pollution here, just think about pollution again from living next to chemical land plants and landfills, and a lot of pollution from cars,
highways, things like airport.
Yes. Like having
factory.
Mm-hmm.
You name it. Yeah.
Yep. So
bauxite mine.
Yeah. So what I did was, can you see this map?
Yes.
So the green is a representation of county level like density of particulate matter exposure. So the more green an area is on this map, I don't know if you can see it really good, but you can see
I can see
right here in like from like Georgia all the way up into lower Michigan, southern Michigan here, we see that there's like this high density of particulate matter exposure. These data, I must warn, these data are taken from the Center for Disease Control and their partnership with NASA. They had these satellites that were placed throughout the country. And from that, they have like these daily averages of these daily exposures that we were able to take. And then what I did was I just kind of averaged that over a 8-year period to come up with like the daily amount of particulate matter that was seen in these counties from 2003 to 2011. Okay. Yes. The red spots that you see here, the red spots are what we call the hot spots for disproportionate number of people dying from lung cancer.
Wow.
And those are, I would suspect that these are urban centers where mostly Black people reside.
In the Midwest.
Yeah. So we see what's interesting is that yeah and no. So we're seeing that a lot of these places are in this Appalachia community, but then also just like a lot of rural places here, right? So these can be farming communities and areas as well, right? There may be a lot of methane gas that has been that remains as a byproduct of like the
industrial farming.
Exactly, right? So here we're seeing just like a difference in, well, the people who live in those red spots, they had about 100 people for every 100,000 people that died from lung cancer, compared to places that were not. So all the other places, right, including Atlanta, right, the rate there was about 75, right? So we can see that this is about 20-something% higher just by living in these places here that are red, that also have higher pollution. I think I did a model here. So I know this is very statistical, but we did a statistical model where we wanted to see that if you were in those places that was the most green, right, we see that those people were more than 5 times more likely to die from lung cancer. And even when we adjusted for, so like here's what we call like a full model, we still see that people who lived in the most heavily polluted counties, right, they had about a 2-fold increased risk of dying from lung cancer. And that's controlling for income, that's controlling for education, smoking, obesity, physical activity, insurance, and things of that nature. Again, that analysis is based on, can you all see me?
Yeah, you're good now. Yep.
Mine went off. No, I see it now. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah. So I like to share that study because it is a great example of, again, how our environment may influence our risk of developing cancer. Again, that study was what we call like an ecologic study. So I can't say that, hey, pollution causes cancer, right? But we can say that it's highly associated, right? So we can say that
from what you just showed me, I just made a few correlations already. For instance, basically, the people who do industrial farming are subject to almost as much toxins as the people in the inner city. So it says a lot about what they're farming. You know what I'm saying? Like, what it is? How is it that you could be growing food and you're subject to this amount of just from growing food? Like, so obviously, whatever they got going on over there might be a lot of GMOs, a lot of carcinogens, a lot of what you call fertilizer. Things of that nature, and like massive amount because industrial farming. Because I didn't expect that. I didn't expect for you to suggest that these places would be subject to that. So that was actually something that I was kind of surprised, but it makes perfectly sense now that I hear it.
And Yasu, and just to add to that, another thing to keep in mind is that I'm here in Kentucky now, but this is Appalachia, and there's